Let's see what's happening in the news today. There's always exciting things happening and a lot of issues that are going on, and we're going to find out what they are. And of course, I've got my good friends Dan Worthington and Lee Newton Rhodes here as well. But on the main thing that a lot of people are talking about is that Nashville school shooting. And there is, of course, news about the shooter and the fact that the shooter might have even revealed that they were going to do a lot of these actions and had confided in friends and a number of other things, and had even been told that they couldn't do anything, the friend, until something active had happened. And I learned that from a friend in the Nashville area. And then you have to sometimes wonder about those kind of situations when they're given warnings and told that they can't do anything until somebody does something, when there should be the notion of intervention. But that's at least what I'm thinking. And I don't know whether Lee and them are going to agree or disagree. And they have also put out some of the stuff about the surveillance that was there. And apparently there was even plans to hit a major mall in that area and a number of other things that are now being revealed as they continue their investigation of that very sad situation. So I'm going to bring up some other things that are going on in the news. And by the way, China is warning of resolute countermeasures if McCarthy meets the Taiwan president. So that is one of the other news stories that I am seeing out there. And we're going to have to learn what people think resolute countermeasures means. That sounds like a lot of political double talk and back talk and all of that kind of terminology. But we're going to find out if folks agree with me or disagree with me on that. And the Israel prime minister has reacted after Biden suggested he abandons reforms. So I guess Biden is trying to get involved in that conflict as well to give his opinion of what should be going on in that way. And definitely there are other things going on. Because actually, Kamala Harris is set to unveil a $1 billion plan in Ghana to promote women's economics and all in that space. So I'm going to try to see more about what that's all about, because that's a lot of money to be given over to Ghana as well. And the Credit Suisse whistleblower has said that the Swiss bank has been helping wealthy Americans. So there's all that talk of the class differences and things in that space as well. And some people are saying that we are in a U.S. banking crisis. I don't know whether anybody's going to agree on that or not agree on that, but it'll be interesting to see what happens in that space as well. So that is some of the world news that I am seeing. I'm sure that there'll be plenty of other news that will come up as I continue to look, and as folks tell me what they've been looking at in their coverage of what is happening as well. So it'll be interesting to see what folks' conversations are going to be about today. Maybe we'll start off with the news of what's going on with that Nashville situation. And matter of fact, Josh Hawley was called a fraud and a coward over his response to that shooting. And we're going to find out whether folks agree with that or not. And over there in Mexico, there is a Mexico detention center fire, and they are saying that 38 are dead after the video shows that are there as well. And we do have our person that is testifying today, so that is actually partially what y'all are hearing in the background. So we do have the Honorable David Walker that will be testifying over there. And I do know that folks are picking up some of that coverage to see what that coverage looks like, as he's got a economic plan that he would like folks to hear about. Plus, he's going to be telling folks about his thoughts about the economy, as well as he often does here on our network every Monday at around 11 o'clock. So that will be interesting. And I'm sure people will be following that with ripe attention to see what he says and what the Congress's reaction is to that as well. And last but not least, potential Republican candidate Chris Christie has vowed to never support Trump again, and he ups his profile with an acerbic attack on Trump. So I guess Christie and Trump are just going to be going at each other left and right, and along those lines. And there's another presidential candidate that folks are looking at, and folks are saying that it could make sense in the sense of the kind of candidate that the Republicans might want. So there are some people that are looking at Glenn Youngkin as a president and saying that he might be worthy of a look as well. And some folks are saying he's done a great job, and that there are even rivals that are admiring him. And of course, one of the front runners is having a very busy April schedule because he is actually going there to Israel. And I think he's got a number of other things that are on his plate as well. So he's planning to travel to Jerusalem as there is, of course, that shrine between the Prime Minister of Israel and Biden. So that might be a sign that he is hoping to be a 2024 presidential candidate, since he has never officially declared of yet. And of course, we're wondering about past candidates. Federal judges are ruling that Pence must testify before the grand jury about any illegal acts by Trump, should there have been any illegal acts by Trump. And of course, that is for the courts to determine. But last but not least, and then we'll get into our discussion, their latest studies are saying that guns lead as the most common cause of death for children and teens in the United States. So I'm going to bring in Lee and all in that space. And of course, we also got Dan Worthington and a number of others, but well, actually one other, that being Dan Worthington, and we'll see if anybody else drops in. But Lee, what are your thoughts about these gun cases? Are our youth having too much access to guns, and what is going on here with the rise of violence, particularly among our nation's youth and everything? So do you have any thoughts? Because they are, every time you turn around, there's another mass shooting.
Mark, I'm going to do what I usually do. What do you mean by youth? What is a youth? Up to what age?
Youth are usually defined as up to like 21. Some people would put it in the category of 25, but usually when they're talking youth, they're talking people that are under 21 is my understanding, even though some people might make it go up to 25. And you're right, it can vary, but definitely.
Even 26 in terms of health insurance staying on a parent's policy.
That could be.
I think one thing is we should first define whatever it's 21 or whatever, we should define that term. And then we should be consistent. Are these youth entitled under the Bill of Rights to rights or not? Is it at 18, 19, 21? At what age do we start giving these people rights? And at what age do we start treating them like adults, letting them sign up for police departments and the military? Do we not want to take recruits until they're 21? Do we want to go there?
Well, I mean, the opposite side of that, and I just learned this from one of our other shows yesterday, because like I said, we are fortunate enough to air Interludes, which is the primary person is out of Chicago, but one of her co-hosts is literally out of Nashville, Tennessee. He's a coach there, and he was letting folks know on the show yesterday, because it's a sports and entertainment type show, that because he is a athletic coach, and again, the high school level, that they are actually thinking about lowering the age. They were actually having a bill that is over there, I think in the entire state of Tennessee, that would lower the age that somebody could get a gun from 18 to 16. And as one of the points that Coach Tony was making, I'm trying to remember Tony's last name, was that he could not send his teenage kid to get him a glass of alcohol or to get him a number of other things, but he could send his teenage kid down the corner to buy a handgun, and there would be not very little questions age asked. And now they're saying that that kid could be even
Mark. I don't think the age is the problem. Any 16-year-old who wants to get a gun can get a gun. Just look at Chicago. Okay, that's not the problem. Okay, I think what we have here is a mental health crisis that we're not dealing with, because I think most of these shooters, if not all, have mental health issues that we're not dealt with adequately.
That's right.
Okay.
And they're most.
One more thing. I'm sorry. And also, most of these people, if not all, are on medication, mind-altering medications through the doctor prescriptions or otherwise. Are we talking about that? Is that a fair game to talk about?
That is a fair thing to talk about, and we can definitely talk about it even here. And that it has been a conversation about a number of the active shooter situations that they were facing various forms of mental health crisis, and you are correct in thinking that it is not being addressed in a number of places. We even have
and one other point I would like you to address, Mark, one other thing I would like to address, if it's really murders and deaths and homicides that we're concerned about, I'm not saying we shouldn't be, why are they only going after these so-called assault rifles, which doesn't exist? Why are they only going after rifles and not handguns, which is overwhelmingly the majority of homicides are handguns? Why aren't they doing that?
Well, I mean, one is there's a very powerful lobby, the gun lobby, that keeps stopping a lot of these conversations and everything. But the other thing that I would be wondering about is of a large portion of the these kind of shootings, the mass shootings, they are using very hardcore type weapons. I think that this young lady had a bunch of AK-47s, and they found
Yeah, 2 rifles and a handgun.
Let's clear this up. It wasn't a young lady. It was a transsexual.
Meaning it was a man, biological man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, like I said, and there's some conversation about that either. But whoever the shooter was, in this case, the shooter, gender, race, or any of that stuff is irrelevant. What we're talking about is the nature of the crime and whether people have greater access to AK-47s and things of that nature. I get that get that people want to protect their homes. I can definitely agree with that. I have family members who have
one of the also
at their home and everything. But there are weapons that are like AK-47s, machine guns, and a number of other things. You're not necessarily going to be. The other thing that people will say that they're getting these guns for is hunting. I would hate to see what Bambi looks like if you're using those weapons for hunting.
Mark. So let's put someone on high doses of estrogen and give them a gun.
Say what?
Let's put someone on high doses of estrogen and give them a gun. That's smart thinking.
Well, like
the problem is that it's on a high dose of estrogen, whether they're a tranny or a female or whatever, they're going to be crazy.
I mean, but doesn't that come down to what
mental health consequences as a result of that?
No, but doesn't that come down to what Lee was just talking about? Because one of the things that I have been arguing at for years is that we got a lot of kids that we are supposedly concerned about, and as soon as they start acting hyper, we put them on the Ritalin, which is another drug that can cause all kinds of problems as well.
So is it
the fact that we are over-medicating a lot of folks and everything? Because we are definitely, in my mind, over-medicating a lot of folks, and some of these drugs, you are right, have
some people are under-medicated.
Huh?
Some people are under-medicated.
There might be some people that are under-medicated, but there are a whole lot of people that are over-medicated and don't get enough medication, and then you've got a number of other issues that are out there as well.
Some people who are just off their medications, right?
There might be some of those as well, but there are some folks that maybe need medication. There's some folks that are walking around looking very lost in just about everything that I can think of.
With Lee, that this is really about a mental health issue. That all these school shootings and all this, guns don't kill people, that people kill people. And they just use guns to kill people. It's crazy people who kill people using guns. Now, the crazy people shouldn't have access to guns. Crazy people shouldn't be given access to guns, especially if it's forecasted and communicated that they're crazy.
But isn't part of the rules that have been put out there?
Everyone kind of knew that this person was a wackadoodle to begin with. Somebody should have intervened and reported this person to the authorities in advance of their idiotic
First off, I don't know if you heard the beginning, but there were reports. That's one of the things that Coach Tony was revealing. There was literally a young lady, in this case it was a young lady, that was this particular shooter told folks what they were planning to do. They went to the proper authorities. The proper authorities then turned around and said, we can't do anything until they do something. So they did not, that's what I meant when I said intervention. They did not intervene because nobody had actually done anything yet.
Mark, I have a question for you. Someone drinks, they go out to a bar, a pub, whatever, and they drink, and they get in their car. They don't turn the car on even. They just sit in the driver's seat. Can they get arrested?
Can they get arrested?
Are they committing crimes?
It comes down to a matter, and that's the other question I was asking. No, they haven't committed any crime, but they're just sitting in the car. But
I'm sorry, can a police officer come over and arrest them?
If they go off,
can a police officer come over and arrest them for DWI?
Hold on a second. If they go off in the car and they hit somebody, and Dan, you tell me if I'm wrong.
No, I'm not talking about driving. Mark, I'm not talking about driving. They just get in the car in the driver's seat, and they're obviously compromised. Drunk, what have you.
In most conversations, most people would either offer them a ride and try to get them to their.
Can a police officer put them under arrest?
And everything, and some people will sleep it off, and sometimes that might be sitting in a car or doing a number of other things.
Let's say they just want to sleep it off, but they're sitting in the driver's seat
in the car, and they hit and kill somebody.
No. I'm not talking about that, Mark.
Go to Dan.
I'm talking about they just get in the car.
Is liable.
Mark, they just get in the car and they want to sleep it off, but they're sitting in the driver's seat. Can they get arrested?
if they're drunk, for public drunkenness, there is a crime called public drunkenness. But I mean, you got to sit there and you got to figure out one, if they are drunk, and a number of other things. So there are questions that I don't know the answer to in that particular
Dan, you're an
scenario.
attorney. Are you familiar with this? With my question,
Arrested.
they can arrest them. They didn't
Right.
commit any crime other than they're drunk and they potentially
And in a
could drive a
vehicle.
car
Yeah.
and they're in a vehicle.
Yeah.
So why don't we apply those same standards once someone's on certain psychopathy or whatever the term is for these medications that these people are taking? And if they have access to guns, those guns should be taken away if they're on these medications.
But if that's the case, and Dan, please, like I said, I'm learning stuff as I oftentimes do on the show regularly and everything. But if that's the case, don't you run into the risk of it becoming almost like a totalitarian state? Because I mean, in just about anybody, there's a number of people just about all over the country, whether they're in Utah, whether they're in North Carolina, whether they're in New York, whether they're in Timbuktu in the United States, that are literally going to bars every day, literally getting inebriated, and in some cases intoxicated. And so if I'm hearing Lee correctly and everything, then you can just do entire raids on those clubs, and if they're just sitting in their car getting ready to drive home and they fail the breathalyzer, then they can just have massive raids and massive arrest of hundreds of people. I mean, it comes down to like those laws that exist about what you can and can't do in your bedroom, because there are a number of things that are against the law in our bedrooms, but they go on regularly and nobody enforces those laws.
But drinking and driving or getting in your car with a blood alcohol level that exceeds the legal limit, with the intent to drive, those are crimes.
But that's the thing. You're talking intent, and we don't know the intent. If you're going in your car, you're drunk. You're going to sit in your car. That's what Lee is asking. If you're going to sit in your car,
don't sit in the driver's seat, Mark. Don't sit in the driver's seat.
No, go lay down in the back and sleep it off.
But that's what I'm saying. But that's my question. If they go in the passenger side, I mean, it's on the driver's side, is what you're saying, Lee. If they sit on the driver's side, can they get arrested? And one,
my understanding is yes.
Doesn't that lay a lot of onus on the police officers to determine if they're that drunk yet? Because we don't know unless they're going to sit there watching them all and everything. Because that would be very like big government kind of situation and everything. So that's what I'm trying to figure out is how are we going to do this when there are so many people that go to clubs on a regular basis, get drunk on a regular basis, and they don't always go on the driver's seat. Some of them might be sitting on the passenger seat and then eventually go to the driver's seat when they think that they are sober enough. Some of them do what you just suggested. They sit there in the back seat and they try to sleep it off. Some of them, the rules that I've always heard, and what the big popular commercials are, is, hand your keys to somebody else and let them drive you home and everything, which a number of people do, and all in that space. So I guess what I'm asking is, how can you, even with the guns, how can you enforce it? I just told you that the kid told these folks that this person's about to do this, and they were told that we can't do anything till they do it.
I understand that, but these doctors who are prescribing these medications, that's a question that maybe should be asked. And if so, then either the parents or the authorities, you shouldn't give them both.
Well, and I disagree. If a person is threatening to make a terrorist act, they can be arrested for that.
They should be, and that should be intervention. But like I said, and that is I agree with you, that is a form of a terrorist act. But there are a lot of folks, and it comes down to that mental health situation, that will swear up and down that in law enforcement. Some of that is lazy law enforcement, and that's what I think happened in this.
That's what happened. That's what happened in this case. If they were given advance notice, they should have intervened, taken them off the streets.
Right. They should take them off the street right then and there. But that's just one case. I've heard a number of these cases where there were folks that had told folks that this was about to happen, and then, they were basically ignored. I think there were some of that cases, even in the case in Minnesota. And I know that, I want to say Sandy Hook, there was a warning. So, I mean, at what point do we actually start listening to folks when they are telling you that they are, as you put it, Dan, slightly off the rocker or slightly crazy, and that they're about to do something?
The thing is, the laws are on the record, the terrorist laws. Anyone that threatens to do an act like this, where it's going to be an act of multiple homicides or whatever, or an attack on a school should be able to be charged under the terrorist laws.
They should be able to be charged under the terrorist law, but I mean, I don't know how much we enforce the terrorism law as well, because I mean, there have been a number of groups, and I know y'all get tired of me using this phrase, but in this case, it is true on both the left and the right that have said that they were going to do terrorist acts in various cities, and they have gone to those cities. They might have even told the police that they were coming, because I know in Durham there was a right-wing group that said that they were coming. This was before the pandemic, because I remember being at that particular rally, and there was a number of folks that were on guard because they were waiting for the folks to come and disrupt it. Fortunately, if they came on the fringe, and they did not actually come into the heart of the city, which was the fear and everything.
A rally is a different thing than a terrorist act.
No, but I'm saying that if you're doing a rally and there are other groups that are actively saying that they're going to come to the rally to disrupt the rally with violent action and everything, that's where it becomes a terrorist act.
Well, yeah, that could be.
Now, some people would say that it's freedom of speech, and they have a right to counter protest. We saw that. We saw that to some degree with the abortion debate.
Bringing guns and weapons is another thing.
But that's what I'm saying.
Mark?
On both sides, and I know we'll get to a different topic, but on both sides. And
Before we do, I have another question.
As a debate, and this is still in the same debate, on both sides of the abortion rally, there have been folks that have said that they were going to bring guns to either disrupt the action that they feel was immoral or everything, or to protect the doctors that they thought were doing the act and everything. So on both sides, both the pro-abortion and the anti-abortion side, there have been folks that have stated publicly that they were going to bring guns to the situation. And until it becomes a firefight or some sort of active shooting, they're just kind of like saying, oh, whatever. And they don't really always check them to see if they are actually active guns within those volatile situations.
What's your question, Lee?
Yep.
Why is it like banks we protect with armed security, federal houses, politicians we protect with armed security, but schools we don't have a policy that there should be armed security in every school?
There's just about armed security in every school that I'm aware of, but like I said,
I don't think that's the policy. And definitely over here they had to call the police to respond. They didn't call the local security guard.
Well, it varies from, like you're saying, it varies from school to school, and it probably should be more of a uniform policy. But I know here they actually use, for quite a few of the schools, they actually use the active police force, because I want to say that the sheriff department and a number of other departments are actually engaged in the security of the police force. They're also engaged to some degree in the security at our mass transit stations, because there are police officers always at mass transit, which can be another volatile point as well. So I
think most schools are no gun zones, which I think is ridiculous.
There's supposed to be no gun zones, and there are schools like the one that was portrayed in Lean on Me and a couple of the other movies that even have what do you call them, metal detectors before it. But then that becomes like some of the school kids, from what I understand, are frustrated about their own personal liberties, and that is what they complain about when they have to go through a metal detector to determine whether or not they're bringing a gun or a knife or whatever.
What are you talking about?
There's just some folks that don't like necessarily to be having those kind of like restrictions on their life, and that's what some people would say. I'll bring in some.
So sad.
But
why aren't they going to countries like
Mark? I mean, in New York, how many of these schools actually have metal detectors, Lee? I mean, I know there are some here that have metal detectors.
Mark, these same kids are going to complain about metal detectors at schools. I have no problem going to the airports to get on an airplane and going through metal detectors there.
True that, and they have. Well, they can't say that. There were people that complained about the metal detectors during the height of the pandemic and even before the pandemic, because of how much of a long line it made, how much you had to go through the whole thing. Because that's ever since 9/11 of taking off your shoes, making sure that you were.
Some of the stuff is just stupidity, though. Let's all agree to that. Taking off belts and shoes.
Say what?
Taking out belts and shoes. Give me a break. Some of this stuff is just stupid, waste of time.
Well, I mean, belts have metal in them. That's why you take off the belt.
So do teeth. You take your teeth out?
The shoes, you can hide a knife in a shoe any day. All you got to do is watch any of the old westerns like James Bond.
Mark, anyone who wants to get a knife into into a school, can get a knife into a school. And even if they can't, as soon as they do, they wait for dismissal. I don't understand most of this stuff anyways. To me, it makes no sense.
But I'm just saying, what you said the shoes make no sense, but there are definitely cases where shoes can be hidden, spy technology can be hidden in the shoe. So I have no problem with taking off of the shoes and all in that space if you're going into security, because I do know that is a.
And the same knife that's in the shoe is not going to show up when they walk through a detector.
I'm saying they take off the shoes so they can actually see if there's a knife down there and all.
Well, if you walk through a medical detector, it's the knife that's going to set off the buzzer, will it not?
I don't know. Depends on how. It depends on what they effective methods they may have put in there to block the detector, because there are ways that you can muffle and block stuff that I'm sure of. But like I said,
And why not take off pants then? Also,
well, there are some folks that might want to do that, but I'm not going that far. But there are folks that would say that you can hide stuff, including some drugs, and that is a known fact in the Mexican cartels and other cartels, that you can hide it in all kinds of orifices, and we do know that has.
But we don't check students for those, do we?
Say what?
We don't check students up their orifices, do we?
If there are people that are suspected of doing stuff, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but I think that once they get to the police, like the checkpoint in, and there are actual active police that are trained, yeah, they'll check your entire body.
Not school kids though, normally.
Well, it depends. If it's school kids going in there and they're doing an active action, I think they would check your entire body. If you're getting on a plane and they think that you might be carrying something in that space, of course, it's going to be like a trained guard. And if you're a woman, it's going to be a woman officer that'll be doing the pat down and everything. But they will definitely go and make sure that they are actively checking.
Oh, wait, Mark, what do they do if someone identifies as a woman, they're a man? Who pats them down? A man or a woman?
I don't know. I'm not in the police force, so I have to find my friends that are on the police force. Because I do have friends on both this police force as well as family members. So I'll ask them and I'll find out for you. But I don't know the answer to that question and everything. Hey, Lee, I had another question for you based on a conversation that we had yesterday, and I wasn't going to get to this, but since we're going into all kinds of conversations and everything, you have mentioned several times, because I was looking it up and all in that space, and I hear what you've been saying when you bring it up, and I've been listening to it, and I can understand. But if you're doing blind tests, and there have been several blind tests on this, then sometimes your biases, meaning your personal biases, come out as well. So I've heard you say that you are.
And it's not a blind test, is it?
Of meritocracy. I'm getting to what I was talking about. A big fan of meritocracy and everything. So I was reading some articles on meritocracy yesterday, and that was some of the points that I was trying to bring up was who determines the merit, and two, if there have been numerous cases of where when the meritocracies have been created, people are biased based on people's names, based on their gender names, since we were talking about gender and a number of other things. Doesn't that create a problem within the meritocracy system unless you find ways to eliminate those issues? Because on the articles that I was reading, and some of them were criticisms of meritocracy, some of them were praising meritocracy, was the notion of one, who determines the merit, and two, also, are there not still biases that exist because of people's creating the meritocracy? Because there was meritocracy to some degree was an answer to the elite aristocracy of some of the past ways of doing things. But I'm just wondering your thoughts, because when I was reading this, I was actually going to send you the article. I may still send you the article, but they
please do
some valid points as to what some of the issues with meritocracy might be. And I just mentioned a couple of them, and I do remember having a guest on, and he brought up the blind studies. He might have even been on our new show, but I know he's been on a couple of mine where they have literally presented only the forms. They didn't have nobody saw the person, but then people were hired based even within meritocracy on their perceived connection to the person that was doing the hiring. Because like I said,
I actually agree with you on this, Mark. To the extent that you can, you should remove as much identifying information as possible that makes sense. Obviously, if you have athletics, you need to see the person perform. So you're going to see what the person looks like, okay? So you can't remove their gender or race or what have you. When it comes to resumes, a good idea maybe to block their names and give them numbers so that you have no biases on because of a person's name or where they may come from or what they may look like, even though that not necessarily is that the case.
Yeah, that could be interesting.
But in order for a society to function, people need to be given, certain information. Like, what college did you go to? How well did you do? What were your majors? What year did you graduate? You can say,
But
what do you need to know that for? Well, because then you maybe be biased towards someone who's older or younger.
or you can be biased according to the college you went to, because somebody
That's a good point also, right? Why did you go to Howard? The odds are if someone went to Howard, they're not, white.
Howard is considered the elite of the HBCUs. That is true. So somebody that went to Howard may not get the same kind of respect that somebody from
Or make it more.
Shaw got, even though Shaw is considered elite in the forms of certain disciplines. Because I know Shaw
I understand that,
in some of the creative arts and is elite, ironically, in the religious circles. Because there's definitely
or they may get more respect because they went to Howard, because someone's looking for that type of population.
But there are folks that might be doing that. They might be looking for certain populations. But then, like I said, if you're going to Sanford, do you get looked at a different eyes or different level than you went if you went to Howard? And it probably varies from place to place and person to person and hiring agent to hiring agent. But there are those biases, and that's part of what the article.
I think one of the best blind studies.
I was also going to raise, because you mentioned
One second, Mark. On this topic. On this topic, I think one of the best blind studies out there was doing. They were hiring people for an orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't tell them anything about the person on the other side, and they put up, blinds there, curtains, so you couldn't see them. They knew nothing about the person, no history, nothing. All they could do is listen to how they played an instrument. That was it.
Right. Yeah, I've seen.
And they hired based on that. That was the study, completely blind, just based on performance, not seeing the person, nothing about the person.
And there have been studies on like that, and there have been interesting results. And I don't know what the results of that particular study was. I'll look it up and find out. But I do know that there have been great studies. I was going to come back to your sports analogy, because I thought about that yesterday and all along those lines. Because yes, you do want the best in athletics, and you want the best player, but there are times that the best player is not always the best player athletically, because I know that there are a number of teams. I am a fan of the Minnesota Vikings, and that's part of the conversation that's going on right now. Is Kirk Cousins actually the best active player on the list of quarterbacks that they are looking at, or is he the best leader? Because sometimes you can be the best leader, and that's what you want on a football field, and not necessarily be the best physical player. Because there are some teams out there that I am aware of that the best quarterback, in the sense of their playing skills, is actually sitting on the sideline. And we've even seen that in the NBA and a number of other sports. But do they exert enough leadership? Because a lot of times you're looking for leaders on the court and on the football fields and any other sports athletics.
That doesn't take your argument doesn't take away from meritocracy, though, because part of that position of meritocracy for that position as quarterback encompasses being a leader.
No, I just said that. I said, and I wasn't arguing that within the sense of meritocracy, but I was saying that is part of the argument that you were making is the physical skill sets of some of the folks and everything. And I'm just saying that you have to look at the entirety picture of.
No, I understand that. And you look at some players who are extremely good at their sport, but they're toxic.
Right, exactly.
The teams will stay away from them because it's just not good for the team.
Right, and there have been cases of that, including players that have brought various toxicity for whatever reasons into their game. Sometimes it's even been their own domestic situations that they have brought that toxicity, and they have gotten docked. There are some people that would argue that's part of what's going on with the Ravens quarterback, but that's neither here nor there, and the only time will tell if he stays the Ravens quarterback or not. But that is some of what folks are saying in that space. So it'll be interesting to see what goes on in that way. And apparently Twitter has restricted somebody again, and I don't know what folks' thoughts are. I know we oftentimes talking about media.
Yeah, I heard about
Marjorie
that.
Taylor Greene is in the news again because apparently Twitter has restricted her account over her thoughts about the Nashville shooting and all of that. So they were saying it was a vengeance post. So I don't know what that means. Did she plan to target folks or what?
No, not she. What I saw was she just reposted something else, which I don't understand why she would get suspended for that if someone else is the actual one who posted it. It was about Antifa calling for the vengeance that she reposted.
So she reposted something and they slapped her for that?
That's my understanding.
How that happens.
I mean, and a lot of times those things happen. People get reposting things and then they are given the credit for what they have posted, even though it's not their thoughts.
Especially if it was Antifa, they don't
Mark,
ever.
there's another. There's the newscaster that I wasn't aware of this. That there's a word other than the N word that refers to the N word, and I forgot what the word was. But Snoop Dogg, whatever, used it in a song, whatever. And some newscaster was quoting Snoop Dogg, who is okay to all these platforms, but this newscaster got kicked off because she quoted Snoop Dogg using a word.
She quoted Snoop Dogg for the comment that he made that was the N word, and I'm trying to.
But it wasn't the N word. It was some other word starting with the N that is a cousin, I guess, of the N word that most people wouldn't even know. I saw this in the news this morning. I just thought that's ridiculous already, because you have these white kids who are just singing songs, repeating the words of these rappers, and because they're the wrong skin color, they get in trouble.
Well, I mean, one of the biggest.
Hey, Mark, I don't think you guys should be able to use the word cracker. That's racist.
Well, it depends. It depends. If it's the term that you're using is a racial term, you're right. But if I want to go get the one of the cracker types of cracker, then I should be able to use that word anytime that I want to, because crackers in that sense are actually a very delicious food.
Yes, but you can also see eeny, meeny, miny, mo, right?
I could do that, but like I've said, if I want to go over there and get a package of crackers, then I should be able to want to go over there and get those and everything.
Oh, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about, right?
That's why I'm giving you a hard time back, because I know exactly what you're talking about in all of that space. But there's also words that are very interestingly used that are very much words that are common, that oftentimes have double meanings, and some people would like to ban those words. I mean, I don't know about the two of you, but some people like to go out to the store and get a package of Oreos. But if you say that,
Mark, help Dan out. Help Dan me out with this.
Upset about that, and if you say that you're going to get a order of apples in the Native American community, there are people that might be upset at that, because in terminology, both of those terms are considered to be, and we can even use tacos as another one, but all three of those are considered to be terms about people that are traitors to their race, for lack of a better term, because they're supposed to be whatever the color is on the outside and white on the inside, and that's why they use all three of those terms, because an Oreo is.
Mark, take a look at the chat. I put a word in there. What happened in the chat? I never heard this before. I'm sure Dan never heard this before. Have you?
I'm going to look up the word. I hadn't gone to that side.
I've never heard of that before either.
Nizzle. I have heard of nizzle. It's in a couple of songs, but it's not an active word. It's not a word that a lot of people use. It's used in some of the rap songs, from my understanding, but it is definitely not a common word, and not even a common word in.
Well, that's the word that she got suspended for or kicked off, because she quoted that word, probably innocently, just saying it just like you said it.
But what was she saying? I mean, was she?
She was just quoting him, not even realizing what the word meant, probably.
Yeah, that's
just like I wouldn't have known it.
Words that they don't realize what they mean. I just gave you 3 examples.
So the moral of the story is: don't quote Snoop Dogg. Don't quote Snoop Dogg.
But wait,
it's okay for Snoop Dogg.
Snoop Dogg has a great commercial where there is him and another salesperson. There's a whole conversation as to whether he is a good rapper or a bad rapper, the other salesperson. And there's the famous line of that he is bad in the sense of not good bad, but bad as in bad. And it's a whole very comical commercial if you ever watch it.
Don't quote that.
I just did. So I guess
we're
going to get in trouble.
You might get some nizzle in your shizzle. I don't know what that means.
Who knows? That could be you just did the nizzle, and we don't even know whether it's going to be happening.
We don't know what a nizzle is. That's
so. Hold on a second. It says Twitter on Tuesday restricted Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene's congressional account for 7 days after she repeatedly posted an image of a poster about a rally called Trans Day of Vengeance. So that's what the thing that she did was she posted an image of a poster, and the rally was called the Trans Day of Vengeance. So Green tweeted about the event after 3 children and 3 adults were killed in a shooting at a Christian school in Nashville. Police.
So what are they going to do? Get together and have a queer cheer?
Well, I mean, this is actually the Trans Day. I don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to target people? That's going to be very interesting, because I don't know what the Trans Day of Vengeance is supposed to be. I mean, are they saying that they're going to go after folks? and things along those lines. You are right that she was quoting something that was going on from Antifa, because the people she's apparently she retweeted after she was warned the first time, but she said the people need to know about the threats they face from Antifa and trans terrorism. I mean, isn't part of the problem
that's a good thing for us to know about, right?
I mean, isn't part of the problem that we are always looking for new scapegoats? And this actually comes to one of the other issues that is going on in the world and everything. And, one of the latest target groups, and I'm not saying that they are all good people, but I'm not saying they're all bad people as well. But we do know that there was a lot of, from various groups, Asian hate when the whole thing came around the pandemic and where it supposedly came from and all in that space. But I mean, there were people that were hating on all Asians and not just the Chinese. They were hating on them just because they were of Asian descent. And I think that some of that still goes on. So, it's the latest boogeyman and everything. I'm sure that Russians are not exactly looked upon in great light in some of the Ukrainian neighborhoods, even in the Ukrainian neighborhoods here in the United States and everything. So it isn't part of the problem in the United States is that we love to have new boogeyman all the time.
Don't get started.
No, in this particular school shooting, Mark, I think Christians, it's fair to say, were targeted. Is this being looked at as a possible hate crime?
Oh,
Well, I mean, it was a Christian school, and that is something that has come up. It was a Christian private school that was, I want to say it was a Presbyterian school, but don't quote me on that. But definitely, I'll have to talk to Coach. Yeah, that's definitely a Christian domination. But I have to talk to Coach Tony because, like I said, he is associated with our network. They're glad to be on Pod TV on a regular basis because they give Pod TV a shout out every time and all in that space. But he actually knew one of the 6 victims. So our prayers do go out to Coach Mike because he actually knew Coach Mike and they had worked together. And that was one of the things he brought up because he usually comes on just to talk sports. And they did get to talking about the Final Four. But I can tell you, he spent the first 15 to 20 minutes dealing with that loss of a friend and somebody that he knew personally and it worked very closely with. And ironically, they were, you'll love this one. One of the things that he revealed was that they were actually doing, guess what, on the day of the shooting?
Who is this?
Lee, can you guess?
Who is doing what?
The school. On the day of the shooting.
What the school is doing?
The school.
I don't know, a fire drill of some sort?
Active shooting drill.
Active shooting.
They were literally doing an active shooting drill on the day of the shooting. And who knows, maybe the lady that targeted them knew that because that might have made her have an easier access point because they were literally doing an active shooting drill on that day. And apparently you have to go around to the back of the school to get to the gym and all in that space. So he was revealing a lot of the stuff that folks did not know because, like I said, he is there in Nashville and knew about it personally. But
so much for the active shooting drill.
Say what?
So much for the active shooting drill.
Yeah, exactly. They
weren't very effective.
They got totally disrupted and all of that. Hey, I do have a question for you, Lee, and I'm moving on to another topic and everything. But I know that there is a part of New York and New Jersey that has always had a notorious history of crime and everything. And apparently the fine folks in the adjacent state are saying that they're fed up with this particular police department, so they're going to take control of it. So that being Paterson, and I do know that Paterson is a very notorious part of the world, Paterson, New Jersey, and everything. But the New Jersey Attorney General's office is taking control of the Paterson Police Department, citing a crisis of confidence. So, do you know anything about this? And
I heard it in the news yesterday. I don't know enough to comment on it though.
Okay, because I'm just wondering your thoughts when like the state is recognizing that somebody is not doing enough work and is looking at ways to exert control. I think we had another story about another state that was doing that recently as well. So I'm just wondering your thoughts.
I'm just curious if these same people are concerned about Paterson have the same concern about the FBI.
Yeah, that would be a good question, and whether the FBI has too much control. And I know a lot of people that are not the biggest fans of FBI. I think this is one issue that me and Dad thoroughly agree on because we have seen the ways that the FBI has manipulated groups, whether they are groups like the Black Panthers, the way there are groups like the Proud Boys. So we have definitely seen the FBI has manipulated a number of groups and sent in double agents to disrupt and do a number of other things in that space. So am I correct in thinking that we agree on this issue?
January 6th.
Huh?
They were behind January 6th is what they were.
And there are folks that would say that they were behind some of the negative actions that took part by some of those left groups as well. So that on this we may agree. We may just agree as to the reasoning and all in that space. We know that they were actively targeted folks that they couldn't get on their criminal ways by imposing the federal government. Because I don't know that we ever would have caught, and I'm going back in history, but I don't know we ever would have caught Dillinger if we had not done the whole thing around taxes and tax evasion and use forces like the FBI and the IRS to catch him.
Wasn't that
was a crafty person?
And they get Capone that way as well.
And it may have been Capone that I was thinking about, but it was one of those two.
I think they shot Dillinger.
Yeah.
Mark, does Pod TV have any faith-based shows?
We got several faith-based shows. I mean, definitely Coco, who will be on tomorrow, is strictly faith-based. So it is very much of a faith-based show. She brings on ministers. She brings on.
When is that?
Huh?
When is that? Can you email me a link, please? I'd like to watch one.
Yeah, Thursday at 6. But yeah, she talks about a number of. She is a former singer for Gerald Levert, who was an active R&B singer and all in that space before he passed away. But yeah, she's had several ministers on, and we even played some of the gospel songs of several of her friends, some that have gone on and won Dove Awards and other gospel awards as well. So it is very much faith-based. As a matter of fact, she opens up with like some prayer type beginning, and she always ends with a prayer. And throughout the show, there is prayers.
Her name is Coco? Coco?
Coco, yes.
Thank you.
I would argue that to some degree, Billy's show is faith-based. I would argue that to some degree, Sharon's show is very faith-based. Even Maxine, who I think you had met here online, is all about faith and everything. So I would argue that we probably have about a good amount of faith-based shows, actually, probably about 6 or 7, if not more.
Very nice.
We are doing quite well in that category, because even the woman that deals with bullying, she oftentimes brings faith into her conversation, because both her and her son, and they do our show on the bullying, which is every Sunday at 6, called Where Is Love? And that is very much around faith kind of things. And even I bring up faith on a lot of my shows as well. And then the Latin ladies bring up faith quite a bit, because we do know there is an active faith community there in Latin America. So yeah, if you're wondering if we are doing anything in that category, yeah, we're covering that big time.
I think that's something greatly lacking in America, and probably other countries also.
No, but faith-based
living, not just the shows, but lifestyles.
Yeah, but that's across the board, because I mean,
100%. Yeah. I'm not picking on anyone in particular.
No, I mean, one of the things that we used to have, and I would like to see us get back to, is there were a number of shows that were definitely faith-based, but also covered other parts of other people's faith. I know that we used to have some folks with the network that were very much in the Indian community, and they brought some of that faith walk into some shows. And I've been having some conversations with some people in that space of spirituality about bringing some shows that will give a different perspective and all. And I was hoping to get, even though that's a Christian show, Mind Closet back, which was actually coming from Nigeria. And I do know we had the Nigerian guys on, but he was going through some family situations, and that's why he is not with us in terms of on the air. But who knows? Hopefully he'll come back. But I agree that I love getting all kinds of different type of shows. But yeah, faith-based folks, if you're listening and you got a show, I'm pretty much the de facto program director. Get in touch with me. bluesradio@gmail.com. I just did a nice little plug there.
We talked a lot today about violence, primarily gun violence, as opposed to violence in general. There's a horrible article up in Canada today. At the Starbucks, I think it was yesterday, where someone asked someone to stop vaping in front of their kids or what have you.
Stop vaping, you said?
Vaping, yeah. Well, I don't know. And they ended up stabbing the person. There's a 30-some-odd-year-old guy to death. They ended up catching the guy.
Isn't that part of the problem?
This wasn't a gun violence. This was a knife or whatever.
But isn't that part of the problem that I brought up? I know I brought it up on other shows. I think we brought it up here. I think Dan even had a comment on it. But how much of that is and I know that some people hate this term because a lot of times it was credited to somebody on the left and everything, but I do believe in the notion of the village and the family village and all in that space, and how much of that is people afraid to have those conversations. Like if you have a disagreement, or even if you see a kid, I'll use both of you. If you see a kid walking around the street that is wearing loosely clad outfits, stuff hanging from their butt and all in that spaces, there was a time that folks, and definitely my parents' generation, and even my grandparents' generation, would call them off to the side and would have a conversation with them, partially about where that culture came from and partially about why they shouldn't be doing that. But now a lot of folks are even afraid to tell a parent where their baby is. If the baby is crying in a grocery store or in a large department store, a large mall, or a number of other things, because they're afraid of the reaction of the parent to them and everything. So I was just wondering, is that something that y'all have experienced or seen as well? Because I know I am always engaged in conversation. Just had a conversation yesterday with a gentleman I had no clue of, and we were talking about the robot that he just bought, because it was one of those house cleaning robots, but it got into a conversation around his now long lost mother and how she had died of ovarian cancer, and how he had a no good boyfriend and a bunch of other things that a lot of folks would probably have not even engaged him in that conversation. But I'm one of those people that will like to learn about my fellow humans and my fellow folks that I'm around, and if he was doing something
Mark,
wrong,
you're a unique person. You can get away with that. You're unique, and the thing is, a lot of people, unfortunately, as a society, not people individually, civility is lacking.
Right. No,
and the first response people have when being criticized or approached is to fight back, as opposed to thinking, well, is there any validity to what this person is asking me? Are they attacking me, or are they just asking a common courtesy?
I mean, and then there's a whole narrative thing, because I mean, the whole most kids in America that I am aware of are very much aware of where the saggy pants culture came from, and some of them, if you bring it up to them, they could care less. But that is definitely a prison-based culture, and all in that space. And part of it was a way to protect yourself from something that oftentimes happens in prisons on a daily basis, and all in that kind of way.
Mark, I heard that also. Well, so why is it modeled outside prisons? What are people thinking by modeling this behavior for young people, teenagers, to behave? Why would they do that?
Will tell you that, I mean, part of it is within the hip hop culture and other cultures. They will tell you.
Why would the hip hop culture model behavior which is antisocial?
Like I said, some people will tell you that it is hip. I don't think it's hip. I don't think it's cool. But there are some folks who will tell you that it is hip.
It's not going to get you the interview.
That was definitely not going to get you an interview, but then then that raises another question. There are not so much that, because that is a extreme version and everything, but should you be allowed to come to an interview in dreads and a number of other things if that is part of your culture, or do you go in there with the more straight, clean cut image, and then you try to talk to management into allowing you to wear those things? I remember, and this is another personal story, but I remember I had a acquaintance, because I've lost total touch with him and everything, but he was of the Muslim faith, and definitely the job that I was working then and still work, one of them, they gave him space to do his prayer, because they knew that the prayer was at a certain time of the day. So he definitely went off and did his prayer, did not interfere with anybody, and all in that space. And I'm sure that when he got hired, he had told them that that was part of his prayer walk and his life walk and everything, and they make accommodations, which they made those accommodations, and nobody really made any question about it. They just respected his beliefs and let him do what he was going to do. And then he would come back and was a very effective leader, because he was actually in management, as I recall. But
I think most people are accommodating. As long as it's not getting away the job, why would they not be? And why would you want to work with a place that is not?
No, but there have been jobs that they are concerned about, and it comes back to that whole conversation we were having earlier. They're concerned that their style, and some of the styles may be more toxic than others, but they're concerned that their style of dress, or their style of hair, or style of a number of other things are not considered proper in the business lane and all in that
No.
space. So, and like I said, that the question becomes: are those decisions that should be made by those corporations, or do you allow people to do the work based on their merit? To come back to your merit talk,
I think
Most
the employer,
corporations have a dress code.
huh?
A lot of employers have a dress code.
They have a dress code, but does the dress code always include hairstyles and a number of other
Yeah,
things in that space?
sometimes. And they,
And
yeah,
and
sometimes it's no, they just say no extreme hairstyles and stuff
well,
like that.
that's a very subjective the term, Dan. That you get into
that's what I'm
problems. I'll
saying.
say,
That becomes very subjective because I mean,
yeah.
unless it's going to interfere, and I'm going to throw something back at you that you threw at me, Lee, and everything. But unless it's going to interfere with the surgery
Clientele.
method and everything and what's going on, I could care less if a Rasta does a surgery on me as long as he's a good surgeon. And if he wants to wear the Rasta hairstyle and everything, I could care less as long as he's not doing anything that is going to compromise what is going on with the surgery. Because I mean, there are ways.
No, I understand that, Mark. But if you're dealing with customers coming into an establishment, you don't want to hire employees that are going to be a turnoff to the customers.
Give me a second.
Well, I mean, but one person's turn off might not be another person. That's what I'm saying. Where do we have the right to dictate what that is and everything? I mean, there's some folks that might not be too thrilled at those of us that have beards and everything, but there are corporations that becomes an issue, but there are other corporations that could care less.
And most people, I think, would care less. I understand that. When it comes to like tattoos and body piercings, I'm not sure that that's the case when you're dealing with, with the public.
Well, it depends on what you do with those body piercings. I had a dear friend of mine that used to have, and she worked at a restaurant that I know the owner quite well, and she had tons of body piercings, well, not body piercings, but tons of tattoos. But that actually became part of the conversation points with her. But she was working at a bar, so those kind of cases, it actually became very much of a conversation point, and I don't think that they were overly distracting. And she definitely didn't reveal all of the tattoos that she had. And I'm not the biggest fan of all tattoos because some tattoos look very great as comes out of that question of artwork and what is art and what isn't, because some tattoos look real great when they first get put on the body and everything, but we do have this lovely thing called aging, and as we age, what looks as a great picture of a rose might not be the prettiest rose as you get older, depending on what your body is doing as well. But there are folks
that's a fair point.
Have their system and they look at it, and there are even folks that can afford to make the changes, and there are others that get it because of the whim of youth and they're stuck with it. But last thing, and I know we're winding down, but one of our other favorite folks is in the news again as well, and that is Governor Newsom, because apparently he has approved the country's first penalty for high gas prices. So there's a new California gas price law, and they're saying that this is a defeat for the oil industry. So the goal of California's anti-gouging law is cheaper gas, but it carries risk, is what one of the opinion articles says. So what are we thinking? Because he's in front of a sign as I'm looking at, and he's saying holding big oil accountable. So is this a fair point, and should other states take his lead in terms of possibly jumping on folks those prices that keep going up and up, and a lot of times they go up seasonally. I think they go up every summer, and I think they go up definitely around Christmas time. And I am a non-driver, but I've observed this for decades now.
Yeah, my antenna goes up whenever a politician says anything, especially when it comes to prices, because first of all, he's probably not being transparent. Included in gas prices are a lot of taxes, which the gas companies have no control over. I'm sure he's not telling people what portion are taxes. Second of all, why is the government's job to demand or get involved with what private companies charge for their product?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. It'll be interesting to see what folks' thoughts are on that and all along those lines. By the way, it does look like...
I'm sorry, I apologize for interrupting. Sasha's trying to get in, and I had a question with to ask Sasha that I had thrown in the chat. So if you can just bring him up, please, I'd appreciate it. Sasha also.
Yeah.
Good morning, Sasha. There's a comment in the chat if you want to take a look at it.
I did not see you in there, and we can keep going.
I'm sitting here for about an hour, but I thought that maybe if there are some reasons that you...
No, not at all. And Lee's just now telling me that you were here, and I'm actually also looking up articles. So sometimes if you're looking up articles, you don't always see the person that is there, which is why it's always good to have other people that serve as the second ads, which happens when Nick and Kim are here. But that doesn't
Okay,
always happen.
we'll have a financial program at 1 o'clock,
Mhm.
as usual on Wednesdays, and we'll talk more about finances, stock market, and I think that would be quite interesting because a lot of things are happening right there now. And I think American becoming resilient in fact that they don't want to rely on government and what they will do for them. They're relying on themselves and trying to use the fabulous financial system of the United States to compensate themselves for all the calamities with its governments, with COVID, with just school shootings and all these negative elements. You have to take control of your life yourself. Nobody's going to do it for you.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. You had a question, and we can go a little bit longer
Yeah,
than that.
just
I do
a comment
apologize.
to Sasha and a question for Sasha. Sasha, there's very sad news out of Canada today about a stabbing yesterday in the Starbucks. I don't know if you heard about that.
Yes, yes.
And also I put a comment up in the chat about the senior Russian diplomat said Wednesday, Moscow is going to no longer inform the U.S. about its missile test.
With Russia, it's much more complicated. I think, like Churchill said about United States, he says that United States does everything right after trying what's everything wrong is there. So eventually, the United States will get it right, but I hope it's not going to be too little, too late. See, I'm reading a lot of Russian press and commentaries, and what I can see now that Russia is not going to, according to popular belief, they are not going to give up. You just don't understand the Russian mentality. What they say is that it's West. It's nothing to do with Ukraine. Who cares about Ukraine? It's a West, United States, who want to carve Ukraine out of Russia influence and create another country, which is very now close. Will be to Moscow. There are about 2 minutes flight from a missile from Ukraine to Moscow in that respect. And now you see the war so far was not really popular among Russian people. It's very difficult to make any educated calculation of whether it's a Gallup poll or anything like this to measure exactly popularity of war in Russia, because a lot of people don't tell you the truth what they actually think. But what's happening is, and it's becoming more evident, is that slowly at the beginning, okay, here's a special operation. Okay, let's see what's happening. Now, the second phase was that Russia got stopped in its marching against Ukraine, and Ukraine actually organized a very capable defense. Now, the third phase now, that the West finally is doing everything to supply Ukraine with all the modern weapons, because now West calculated that the long war, it's not in its interest. They will not be able to withstand Russia in a long war. So it must be short and must be victorious. And for that, a lot of weapons and ammunition have to be sent to Ukraine. And right now, I am reading every day what's actually coming in Ukraine. You just won't believe. Forget about the American weapons like Abrams tanks or F-16s. There are Europeans supplying incredible amount of weapons to Ukraine. The Challenger tanks from England. There are Mirage fighters from France. There's all kind of shells and weapons and artillery from Baltic Republic already gave everything what they had. They have no defenses anymore. They gave everything to Ukraine. Poland is giving a lot of things. Czech Republic, Slovakia, just name it. And of course, UK is right. Very, a lot of powerful things. So Ukraine is doing really well, even if they will not start their attack. They're very capable now to resist Russia for a long, long time. However, what I wanted to mention is that in Putin's 20 years plus power, staying in power, created some kind of, especially with the very high prices for oil, it was kind of some stability in Russian society. Um, those people who were close to power, they enriched themselves tremendously. And even the people on the periphery, they also had some advantages from this high oil prices and booming economy. Now, what's happening now with Western sanctions? The level of life of average Russians is going down big time, and they see now it's not as a fault of Putin who started this war. No, they see the well. They thinking is this: if Putin started the war, there must be a reason why he did it. Because if there would be a reason, he wouldn't done. So there must be a reason. So if Ukraine wouldn't resist, so everything would be fine. The operation would be over very quickly in 2-3 weeks, and we are going back to normal, happy life. But that's not happening because Ukrainian resistance. Though now most of the people in Russia, they hate Ukrainians. They hate West who supports the Ukrainians. So now they are trying to make it into, instead of very unpopular special operation, in a very popular so-called patriotic war. Russia is fighting not just Ukraine, and the last thing what they're fighting Ukraine. It's a international imperialism who is trying to evict Russia from the modern financial system, inflict as many damages as possible, or so on. So slowly, what I'm afraid is that the war is becoming more and more popular in Russian society, and they are going openly, and they are already openly supporting that. And so whereas Russian morale is rising because of the reasons what I told you, in West morale is very uncertain. Today they're supporting Ukraine. Months from now, somebody will say that no, it's not our business. Let them do whatever they want. There will not be support for Ukraine. So the situation is very fickle, and it's very difficult now to predict what's really going to happen.
It'll be interesting to see, and who knows, maybe we'll also see if Putin's got to deal with his own mental health and all of that, because we were talking about mental health earlier as well as part of the news story, and we do know that he's definitely got some mental issues and all along those lines. And by the way, and the last thing that I'll mention, and this is actually an answer to what Lee was talking about earlier with the mental health crisis, apparently the fine folks in California are dealing with that as well. They've come up with something called the California Care Court, which is aimed to assist people suffering with untreated severe mental illness. So they are championing this, and apparently it passed last fall. It was signed into law by their governor. But guess what? You can petition a judge who could order mental health and other treatment and support under the 2-year care plan that counties' behavioral health systems have to fund. So it's another case of government-funded activities going on, and it looks like quite a few counties, including Riverside, San Diego, and the city and county of San Francisco, followed by the Los Angeles County as well. So there's a lot of folks there because apparently it is a big issue, mental health in that part of the country. So they're saying that they have a serious crisis there in California in that way and everything. So they are coming up with this care plan that they're saying that could help them, as they are saying that this is a very major issue in their community. And a lot of people are walking around with those things. And they're saying that the care court could initially serve between 7,000 and 12,000 people across California. That's a fairly big state. So that's not really that many people in my mind. But if it's that big of an issue, they probably got to do more. But I don't know if you got any last thoughts around that. But that is an example of a state that apparently is trying to do something about it.
Mark, I think we're out of time. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Yep, we are definitely out of time.
Take care.
And
Sasha, whenever you get it, just put something in the chat, and I'll give a comment to Mark to give him a nudge.
Yes.
Take care, Mark.
Yeah, definitely do that. Chat, because I see that sometimes more than I see the other stuff. So give me the nudge when you can. But we're getting ready to get out of here. Of course, we'll have the investment show later on. But always good having a conversation with you, Lee, and we'll be back
Mark,
on
same.
tomorrow.
Take care. God bless. See you tomorrow.